of kings and Lord of lords, bless, we beseech thee, this crown, and so sanctify thy servant Charles.
Something historic has just happened, and it's sending ripples through royal and religious circles alike. King Charles III has been honored with a brand new title by the Vatican, a gesture so rare it's never been done before in the modern era. So, what does this mean for the monarchy? Why did the Vatican make this unprecedented move? And how does it reshape King Charles's image on the world stage? Stay tuned, because this royal twist is far more symbolic and surprising than anyone expected. A historic meeting at the heart of faith. For the first time in more than 500 years, the leader of the British monarchy walked through the Sacred Heart of Vatican City. King Charles III and Queen Camilla arrived beneath the towering dome of St. Peter's Basilica, a place where faith, history, and power have crossed paths for centuries. The moment their motorcade stopped before the Apostolic Palace, the weight of history seemed to settle in the air. Stepping out, King Charles carried the quiet dignity of a monarch deeply aware of what this day represented. With a warm smile and a respectful bow, he greeted Pope Francis, the head of the very church that once stood in conflict with his own. Beneath the ancient frescoes and marble pillars of the Basilica, the meeting unfolded with a rare sense of peace. As the king and queen walked beside the Pope through the grand corridors, their footsteps echoed softly, a sound that felt symbolic, almost sacred. Where division once ruled, unity now whispered through the air. Then came the moment that silenced the room. The king and the Pope, two leaders of faith and influence, knelt together in prayer. For the first time in half a millennium, the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church shared a moment of devotion under one roof. Cameras clicked quietly, but everyone present understood. This was history being rewritten in humility and grace. Behind closed doors, the tone shifted from ceremony to conversation. The king and the pontiff spoke not of politics or power, but of shared hopes, protecting the planet, healing divisions, and nurturing compassion in an uncertain world. When the time came for the traditional exchange of gifts, the gestures felt deeply personal. Each item represented not protocol, but purpose, symbols of faith, endurance, and reconciliation. Later, as the sun dipped behind the Vatican gardens, the atmosphere softened. The laughter between the king and the Pope carried a human warmth that centuries of separation could not erase. What began as a diplomatic visit had become something far more meaningful, a bridge across time and belief. As evening fell over St. Peter's Square, the moment lingered like a quiet promise. 5 centuries after faith and crown had drifted apart, they now stood side by side, not as rivals, but as partners in hope. But as the world watches this new bond form, one question remains. Could this be the beginning of a spiritual reconciliation that reshapes history once again? This story is far from over. A prayer that rewrote history. Inside the Vatican's legendary Sistine Chapel, beneath Michelangelo's breathtaking fresco of the Last Judgment, history unfolded in a way the world had never seen before. The air was thick with reverence as King Charles III and Queen Camilla entered the sacred chamber, greeted by the gentle hum of centuries-old chants. The chapel, known for crowning popes and shaping empires, became the setting for something far greater than ceremony. It became a moment of healing. As the royal couple took their seats beside Pope Leo XIV, time seemed to pause. Latin chants echoed softly through the painted dome, mingling with English prayers that followed. The Sistine Chapel Choir joined voices with 2 royal choirs from Britain, their harmonies rising together in a sound that seemed to bridge the very centuries. For the first time in half a millennium, these sacred walls heard both Catholic and Anglican voices lifted in shared devotion. This wasn't politics, this was worship and reconciliation. King Charles, as Supreme Governor of the Church of England, stood solemnly beside the pontiff. Together with Archbishop Stephen Cottrell, They led a joint service that symbolized faith uniting beyond division. Queen Camilla watched quietly, aware that this day would be remembered for generations. Though Charles had met Popes John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis before, none of those moments had included kneeling together in prayer. Until now. To understand why this matters, we must look back to 1534, when King Henry VIII severed England's ties with Rome. His request for an annulment from Catherine of Aragon was denied by Pope Clement VII, and that rejection reshaped the course of history. The Church of England was born in defiance. Lands were seized, monasteries dissolved, and faith itself became a weapon of power. Under Henry's daughter, Queen Mary I, the pendulum swung violently back toward Catholicism. Hundreds were executed in the name of belief. The wounds that followed ran deep, dividing families, nations, and hearts for centuries. And yet, on this day, beneath Michelangelo's masterpiece, the echoes of that broken past began to soften. Reverend James Hawke of Westminster Abbey called it a healing of history, something unthinkable just a generation ago. As the service ended, King Charles and Pope Leo exchanged gifts, each symbolizing hope, humility, and renewal. Outside, the bells of St. Peter's rang across Rome, their sound carrying a message 500 years in the making. A prayer once thought impossible had been spoken aloud. But could this sacred moment mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where faith finally triumphs over divisions? Stay tuned. A royal title like no other. It was a day filled with history, faith, and quiet symbolism. Earlier that morning, King Charles III and Queen Camilla met privately with Pope Leo XIV inside the Apostolic Palace, a meeting that, though brief, carried centuries of meaning. Behind the ornate doors of the Vatican, the two men spoke not as monarch and pontiff, but as guardians of faith and tradition, reflecting on the urgent challenges of a changing world, from the climate crisis to the moral responsibility of leadership. But the true moment of history came later that afternoon, when the king traveled to the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, one of the four most sacred churches in all of Catholicism. Beneath its towering arches and golden mosaics, the Pope presented King Charles with a new title never before bestowed upon a British monarch, Royal Confrater, meaning royal brother. The title itself carried a message: reconciliation after 500 years of division. Alongside it came a remarkable gift, a hand-carved wooden chair etched with King Charles's royal coat of arms and inscribed with the words, "That they may be one." This chair, symbolic and sacred, will remain in the Basilica's apse, reserved for future British monarchs who continue this journey toward unity. Charles, in turn, responded with an equally powerful gesture. Buckingham Palace confirmed that he had granted Pope Leo 2 British honors, naming him the Papal Confrater of St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, and appointing him a Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath, one of Britain's highest orders of chivalry. These weren't mere courtesies. They were acts of mutual respect, threads in a tapestry of faith woven tighter than ever before. The day's service also marked another milestone. Archbishop Stephen Cottrell stood in for Sarah Mullally, recently announced as the first woman ever chosen to serve as Archbishop of Canterbury. She will assume her role next year, a powerful sign of how the Anglican Communion continues to evolve and open new doors. Meanwhile, the dialogue between the Catholic Church, with 1.4 billion members, and the Anglican Communion, with 85 million, has been slowly mending since the 1960s. They now agree on far more than they once did, though differences, such as women's ordination and clerical celibacy, still remain. Yet the momentum toward unity feels unstoppable. This was not just a royal visit, it was the beginning of a new chapter in the shared history of faith and leadership. Could this bold act reshape the monarchy's spiritual role in the modern world? Might other royals follow Charles's lead, bridging ancient divides? One thing is certain: King Charles has made history, and the echoes of this day will be felt for generations to come. A day that rewrote history. Without question, History was made today. The state visit of King Charles III and Queen Camilla to the Vatican, and their meeting with Pope Leo XIV, will forever be remembered as one of the most extraordinary chapters in modern royal diplomacy. The day unfolded with quiet grandeur, filled with symbols, emotion, and moments that echoed through time. Though there were many striking scenes, 3 in particular stood out as truly groundbreaking, each carrying the weight of centuries. The first, and most breathtaking, was the sight within the Sistine Chapel, that sacred chamber where Michelangelo's Last Judgment still seems to breathe from the ceiling above. Beneath that masterpiece of divine art, the king and queen knelt beside the Pope in prayer. The moment was serene but powerful. The ancient rhythm of Latin chants intertwined with English prayers, filling the air with harmony that transcended history. The Sistine Chapel Choir joined voices with the choir of St. George's Chapel at Windsor, creating a union of sound that felt almost miraculous. For the first time in more than 7 centuries, a British sovereign shared a moment of worship with the Pope, an image once thought impossible. To understand how astonishing this was, we must look back to the High Middle Ages. The last monarch to take part in such a service was likely King Edward I, long before the Reformation changed the course of history. In 1271, while still heir to the throne, Edward joined the Ninth Crusade to the Holy Land, accompanied by Tealdo Visconti, the papal envoy. During that very crusade, Visconti was elected Pope Gregory X, forever linking their names in a brief, unexpected chapter of faith and diplomacy. But after 1534, everything changed. King Henry VIII's break with Rome, sparked by the Pope's refusal to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, created a divide that lasted centuries. The Church of England was born, and relations with the Vatican froze in bitterness and suspicion. The idea of a reigning British monarch praying beside a pope became unthinkable, a dream buried under political and religious strife. Only in the 20th century did slow reconciliation begin. King Edward VII met Pope Leo XIII in 1903, though only as a private visitor. 2 decades later, King George V and Queen Mary met Pope Pius XI under the same restrictions. Each encounter pushed the boundaries a little further, step by cautious step. And now, centuries later, King Charles III has gone where his ancestors could not, bridging faiths once torn apart by power, pride, and blood. The chapel that once symbolized division now stands as a monument to unity. Will this historic prayer be the first step toward a future where faith and crown walk side by side once again? Keep watching. A royal honor, unlike any other. It was Pope Pius XII who welcomed King George VI and Queen Elizabeth in the early 20th century. But it was his daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, who truly reshaped the relationship between the British monarchy and the Vatican. During her long reign, she met 5 popes, not as a private visitor, but as a head of state, symbolizing a new chapter in centuries of divided faith and cautious diplomacy. Her first visit came in 1961, when she and Prince Philip were warmly received by Pope John XXIII, the beloved good pope whose kindness and vision for unity made a lasting impression. Almost 2 decades later, in 1980, she met Pope John Paul II, a figure of immense global influence and spiritual strength. Their bond deepened 2 years later, when he made a historic trip to Britain, the first papal visit since England's break from Rome nearly 5 centuries earlier. At Buckingham Palace, Queen Elizabeth welcomed him with respect and grace, a meeting that symbolized reconciliation after generations of separation. In the years that followed, the Queen met Pope John Paul II again in 2000, and later Pope Benedict XVI in 2010, hosting him with honor at Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh during his visit to the United Kingdom. Her final encounter came in 2014 when she met Pope Francis at the Vatican, a warm and personal meeting filled with laughter, gifts, and mutual admiration. That encounter marked the closing of one royal chapter and quietly set the stage for a new one under her son, King Charles III. Now, decades later, King Charles and Queen Camilla have taken that legacy even further. During their state visit to the Vatican, an extraordinary and historic exchange took place, one that no British monarch has ever experienced. For the first time in recorded history, the Pope and the British sovereign exchanged honors, a gesture of mutual respect and brotherhood that carried immense symbolic weight. The last time an English king received any papal honor was in 1521, when Pope Leo X granted Henry VIII the title Defender of the Faith for his book defending Catholic doctrine against the ideas of Martin Luther. The irony is famous. Within a decade, Henry had broken away from Rome, forming the Church of England and igniting centuries of religious division. That deep fracture lingered for generations, making today's moment all the more profound. The Order of Pope Pius IX, founded in 1847, is the highest papal order of knighthood. Its roots stretch back to an earlier order created in the 16th century by Pope Pius IV, later revived by Pope Pius IX as a mark of honor for noble and distinguished service to faith and humanity. By 1856, the order was divided into three ranks: Knight Grand Cross, Commander, and Knight, mirroring the great European traditions of chivalric distinction. Today, King Charles III was made a Knight Grand Cross of the Order, the highest possible rank, and was also granted the rare privilege to wear the collar of the Order, a right reserved only for foreign heads of state. Queen Camilla, following the ancient custom of papal honors for royal consorts, was appointed a Dame Grand Cross, a distinction few have ever received. Observers in the Vatican described the moment as both solemn and moving. On the table before them rested a small velvet box bearing the papal arms, believed to hold the king's collar. Moments later, Queen Camilla was seen attaching the miniature medal of the order to her left shoulder. The gold cross gleamed softly under the light of Michelangelo's frescoes as she wore it throughout the sacred service in the Sistine chapel. This was not mere ceremony. It was history, a gesture of unity that spoke louder than words. For centuries, crowns and crosses had stood apart, divided by doctrine and pride. But today, under the painted heavens of the Sistine Chapel, a king and a pope stood together, not as rivals, but as brothers seeking common purpose. Could this be the dawn of a new age of faith, diplomacy, and shared destiny between Rome and the crown? Stay with us. A moment etched in faith and history. Although King Charles III is the first British sovereign in history to be granted such a sacred distinction by the papacy, he is not the first non-Catholic monarch to receive this particular honor. Among the few who share this rare recognition are King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden and the late King Bhumibol Adulyadej of Thailand. Both deeply respected figures in their own right, and both granted the privilege of wearing the collar of the papal order, a symbol reserved only for sovereigns of exceptional standing. The gesture from Pope Leo XIV carried extraordinary weight. It represented not only respect, but a visible sign of reconciliation between two institutions long divided by history. Yet the exchange was mutual. In an equally remarkable and unprecedented act, King Charles bestowed upon Pope Leo XIV the title of Honorary Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath, one of Britain's most distinguished honors. The Order of the Bath, which traces its roots back to medieval chivalric traditions, was formally re-established in 1725 during the reign of King George II. It exists in two divisions, military and civil, and is typically awarded to foreign heads of state or individuals who have rendered exceptional service to the United Kingdom. But never before, in the long history of British honors, had it been granted to a pope. The moment was quietly revolutionary, a recognition that transcended politics and faith, bridging centuries of formal distance with one powerful act of mutual respect. In official photos from the ceremony, The collar of the Order of the Bath can be seen glinting on the left side of the table, its golden links symbolizing duty, honor, and service. As Charles presented it to Pope Leo, the exchange of glances between the two men spoke volumes, one of humility, reverence, and a shared desire for unity between their worlds. That moment marked the second groundbreaking milestone of this royal visit to the Vatican. But the third was no less extraordinary, and perhaps even more spiritually profound. Later in the day, the king traveled to one of Catholicism's four great basilicas, the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, the resting place of St. Paul the Apostle himself. Within its towering marble columns and golden mosaics, history came alive once more. There, beneath the flicker of eternal lamps, King Charles was formally installed as a royal comforter, meaning royal brother, of the Benedictine monastic community that has served the Basilica for centuries. This was far more than a symbolic gesture. It was a revival of an ancient bond between England's monarchy and this sacred Roman Church, a bond that dates back over 1,000 years. In Anglo-Saxon times, the Basilica of St. Paul held immense spiritual significance for English kings, who often sent lavish gifts and offerings as tokens of faith and friendship. For nearly 200 years before the English Reformation, the kings of England were recognized as formal protectors of the Basilica and its Benedictine abbey. Remarkably, even after half a millennium of religious separation, traces of that historic relationship still remain. To this day, the coat of arms of both the abbey and its abbot is encircled by the Garter, the emblem of the Order of the Garter, the most senior and noble British order of chivalry. It is a subtle but enduring reminder of a time when England and Rome walked side by side in faith. As part of his new role, King Charles was seated among the Benedictine brothers on a specially commissioned wooden chair, hand-carved with his royal coat of arms. Along its frame gleamed an inscription in Latin. Translated as, that they may be one. The symbolism was breathtaking. 5 centuries after Henry VIII's defiance tore the Christian world in two, his descendant sat humbly within Rome's sacred walls, embraced as a brother in faith. The ancient stones of the basilica seemed to breathe again, as if acknowledging the healing power of time. It was not merely ceremony. It was reconciliation made real, a moment when crowns, crosses, and centuries of division gave way to understanding, humility, and unity. Could this be the beginning of a renewed spiritual alliance between Canterbury and Rome? The answer, perhaps, lies in the quiet power of that Latin phrase, that they may be one. That they may be one, a prayer across centuries. The Latin words engraved on King Charles's newly commissioned seat, ut unum sint, meaning that they may be one, carry a depth of meaning that stretches far beyond ceremony. They are taken from the high priestly prayer of Jesus Christ, found in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 17, verse 21, where Jesus prays to his Father that all who follow him may be one, just as you, Father, are in me, and I am in you. It is a prayer for unity, not only of faith, but of spirit, a yearning for reconciliation among all who believe. Now, almost 2,000 years after those words were first spoken, they have found a new echo inside the ancient walls of the Basilica of St. Paul, outside the walls in Rome. Here, King Charles III, the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, sat in quiet reverence beside Pope Leo XIV, head of the Roman Catholic Church. The symbolism of that image alone would have seemed unimaginable for centuries. Yet beneath the golden mosaics and marble pillars, what unfolded was far more than history being made. It was history being healed. This moment, tender and profound, tied the present to the past in a way few ceremonies ever could. The king's new title of royal confrater, meaning royal brother, bound him to the Benedictine community that has served the sacred basilica for centuries. It was a gesture of inclusion, one that reached across the divide that began with Henry VIII's break from Rome nearly 500 years ago. But in a gesture of true reciprocity, the Vatican responded in kind. To commemorate the ancient spiritual connection between the English crown and the Basilica, Pope Leo XIV was made an honorary papal confrater of the College of St. George at Windsor Castle, a title steeped in royal history and sacred tradition. The college, housed within St. George's Chapel, is the spiritual home of the Order of the Garter, Britain's oldest and most distinguished order of chivalry. This gesture, inviting the Pope symbolically into the royal spiritual household, carries extraordinary meaning. It is a step that acknowledges centuries of shared Christian faith despite long-standing divisions. It's possible that Pope Leo will even receive a ceremonial stall within the choir of St. George's Chapel, among the banners and heraldic crests of knights and monarchs past. If that comes to pass, it would be an image rich with irony and grace. A pope's name honored in the very chapel where once the English Reformation drew its defining line of separation. Such symbolism would have been unimaginable not long ago. Yet, here in the 21st century, under the reign of King Charles III, reconciliation is not merely a dream, it is being written into the fabric of history. This royal visit to the Vatican has delivered 3 groundbreaking moments, each monumental in its own way. The first, of course, was the sight of a British monarch and a reigning pope praying together inside the Sistine Chapel, the first time such an event has occurred since the 13th century. That shared prayer beneath Michelangelo's Last Judgment was not a mere formality. It was a meeting of faiths, a silent recognition that humility can achieve what centuries of politics could not. The second was the exchange of honors, another first in royal and papal relations. When Pope Leo XIV bestowed upon King Charles and Queen Camilla the Order of Pope Pius IX, and the king in return granted the Pope the Order of the Bath, it symbolized something greater than protocol. It was a mutual acknowledgement that both crown and church, though distinct in purpose, are bound by shared ideals: faith, service, and the pursuit of peace. And finally, the third moment, the king's installation as royal confrater of St. Paul's Basilica, re-established a bond that had lain dormant for half a millennium. To sit among the Benedictine brothers, on a chair inscribed with the prayer for unity, was to affirm a legacy of spiritual guardianship once held by England's medieval kings. As King Charles and Queen Camilla departed the Vatican that evening, the meaning of the day lingered. The marble halls that had witnessed centuries of division now stood as silent witnesses to reconciliation. It was more than diplomacy. It was devotion. More than history. It was healing. So what do you think? Could this truly be a new era for Church and Crown? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.